Everyone thought he was an ordinary high schooler, but he turns out to be the strongest fighter who is the reincarnation of God himself. Jin Mori seems like just another ordinary high schooler from the outside, but he lives all alone and struggles to make ends meet after his grandfather, who was his last known family, left him when he was a kid. He has a dream of competing in the legendary God of High School tournament, which is Seoul's biggest annual mixed martial arts competition in which the most talented young fighters show off their skills to the whole nation. The best part is that the winner is allowed to ask for any wish to be granted. On the day of the prelims, he wakes up to see his alarm clock is broken and realizes that he overslept on the most important day of his life. He immediately races off to the arena on his bicycle, but on the way, notices a poor old woman get robbed by a thief on a motorbike. Hearing her screams for help makes him imagine that she's the loving grandmother of a child with cancer, so he immediately chases the thief to get her the precious money back. He expertly twists and turns around the traffic and almost catches up with the thief, but the thief ends up diverting to another road when a truck gets in between them. Jin tries to parkour his way up a ramp and into the same lane, but instead hits a girl right in the face with his front wheel. He apologizes and tries to speed off again, but the girl, who is furious about her broken glasses, pulls out a wooden sword and throws it at him, which causes him to crash. He tells her the sad story of the robbed grandmother, which bring her to tears, and they join forces to catch the snatcher together. The thief tries to lose them by turning a sharp corner with his bike, but thanks to the girl's sword, Jin also makes the turn and continues the chase. The thief gets baffled and throws a bunch of money to try and get rid of them, but the girl launches herself to deliver an aerial attack on his sorry ass, except she crashes into a road sign. The thief thinks he finally got away, but suddenly gets punched in his face, which causes his helmet to shatter and his motorbike to crash. Jin and the girl stare at the guy who helped them in awe, and he looks back at them with a cool gaze. It turns out that all three of them are late to the God of High School's prelims, and they just barely make it in time. After catching their breath, Jin thanks the two for their help and introduces himself. The black-haired dude introduces himself as Han, and the girl introduces herself as Mira. The time for the tournament arrives, and the announcer hypes up the audience in the arena with the rules of the tournament, which are super simple. Basically, nothing is off limits, and each duel goes on until the opponent surrenders or is knocked out. All contestants are equipped with a bracelet that displays their physical and vital stats to guarantee instant medical attention in case of injuries. After explaining everything, all the contestants are summoned to the stage and in a surprise twist are asked to begin fighting. Everyone is stunned when they realize that instead of the usual dual pairings, everything will be decided by a battle royale this time. The first to react are two boneheads who immediately start squaring up for no reason, which soon fuels all hell to break loose. Participants start flexing their moves, some using only their bare fists while others use wooden swords and nunchucks. Han and Mira easily topple their opponents with their skills despite being outnumbered. Meanwhile, Jin calmly does stretches until a group of brainless delinquents run toward him together. He obliterates all of them with his lightning-fast kicks while not letting anyone lay a scratch on him. Suddenly, the arena's door opens and the host announces the arrival of the wild card contestant named Manoch the convict. He arrives at the arena in a straitjacket, but he doesn't let it get in the way as he immediately starts wiping the floor with the contestants using unbelievable speed. Enjoying this a bit too much, he begins repeatedly kicking one of the fallen men's faces while taunting the others for being weak. The sight upsets Mira, who blindsides him with a quick attack, but he quickly regains his balance and dodges the rest of her lunges until he grabs a hold of her wooden sword with his foot. She grits her teeth and strikes his stomach super hard, which forces the breath out of him. Before he can recover, she roundhouse kicks him in the face but fails to make him fall. Jin covers for her by pulling down the guy's pants, which is enough for Manoch to divert his attention to him. He kicks Jin away, but notices that he protected himself in the last second to prevent any serious injuries. Jin gets back on his feet quickly with Mira's sword in hand, and the two run toward each other to fight it out. However, the clash is cut short when Mira butts in and snaps Jin's neck to get her sword back. After that, the round comes to an end and everyone gets to rest, while the advanced nanotech robots from the bracelets heals their injuries. While returning home, Jin annoys Mira until she lets him and Han walk with her because they have to go in the same direction. On the way, he asks them why they joined the tournament, explaining that he's in it to fight and get as strong as he can. He remembers the time he was approached by a blonde tournament recruiter, which ended with him somehow getting his ass kicked. Han simply says that he's doing it for the money, while Mira reveals that she wants to revive her family's swordsmanship dojo. Jin teases her by grabbing her sword and playing with it while she tries to snatch it back, but he accidentally drops it into the stream below. This crosses the line, and she slaps him firmly and tells him to get out of her sight immediately. Without saying another word, she gets into the water and begins looking for it. She begins to lose hope after a while and sadly remembers the time her father told her to never let their family sword style die. Ever since then, she had devoted her life to finding a suitable successor. She is snapped out of her thoughts when Jin flashes a light at her and offers his help in looking for the sword. After spending some time wading through the water, she apologizes to him for slapping him earlier and explains that she got all worked up because the sword is a memento of her father. As he promises to find it, a bright light floods their vision. They look up to see Han has brought a big spotlight from the supermarket he works in to light up the entire stream and help them look for it. The next day, all the remaining contestants gather at the lounge, where Manoch approaches a sleeping Jin and tells him that he'll crush him the next time they fight. Jin continues snoring, pissing Manoch off, but a random guy interferes and reminds him this is not the place to fight. Manoch just kicks his face, causing his nose to bleed, but he is still somehow on his feet. He then turns around to see Jin supporting him from behind, after which Jin advises him to never let his guard down. Soon after the incident, round 2 of the prelims begin, where the best performing contestants in the battle royale are paired up against each other for duels. The first match is between Mira and a guy with a buzz cut, who gets his ass handed to him within the first second. The next is between Jin and a fat guy nicknamed the Beast. After throwing a couple of taekwondo-style punches, Jin successfully knocks the Beast out and wins. In the next few matches, the lady wrestler Ma and the silent nerd with a baseball bat named Beak secure landslide victories. Meanwhile, in the break room, Jin watches the live broadcast as Han obliterates his opponent. At that moment, he is approached by the guy from earlier who introduces himself as Gamdo and thanks him for saving him from Manoch. He gets ready for his fight against Manoch, saying that his biggest fear is to lose in spirit to a guy who he doesn't respect as a martial artist. Once the two enter the ring, Gamdo sternly tells Manoch that even though he's strong, he has lost his path as a martial artist and so must be defeated. As soon as the match begins, Gamdo overwhelms Manoch with Tai Chi moves and eventually launches him out of the ring. The referee begins the 20-second countdown within which Manoch has to return to the ring. With the help of a few spectators who push him back up, he re-enters the fight. Gamdo tries to kick his face twice, but both miss their target. After realizing that Manoch broke out of the straitjacket to block his second kick, Gamdo quickly retreats and assumes a defensive position. Once Manoch's right hand is free, the tables instantly turn and Manoch is able to land a storm of punches coupled with a bunch of dirty attacks from northern-style taekwondo like eye gouging and groin punches. Eventually, Gamdo lays motionless on the ground, but Manoch picks him up and continues to beat him up like a ragdoll as payback for his earlier comments. Gamdo devotes all his energy into controlling his emotions and composing the perfect Tai Chi attack, but it has no effect on Manoch and he is instead pushed back to the other side of the ring. Manoch continues to beat him to a pulp, while demanding he ask for forgiveness, but Gamdo bears it all and refuses to apologize to him. Everyone is speechless while they watch Manoch relishing the feeling of breaking Gamdo's arms, but he is finally stopped by Jin, who tells him he hates his style of taekwondo and kicks him aside. Manoch tries to fight back, but Jin kicks him away like a football. But the scuffle is broken up by the tournament's commissioners, who remind Jin that interfering in another fight is a serious breach of the rules. Manoch ignores this and gets back up with renewed rage, against which the commissioners are unable to do anything. However, Jin is able to knock him out with a 3-step kick before he himself gets pushed to the ground by some supernatural force. The commissioners let out a sigh of relief after realizing this means that their senior manager Mujin has arrived. Mujin coolly walks into the ring and announces to the audience that Jin will be punished for breaking the rules, but the tournament will continue as it was meant to, causing everyone to cheer. After that, Jin is escorted out of the stage by commissioners as his new fans applaud for him. He is taken to a room where he must wait until the organizers decide his punishment. But he doesn't let this get to his nerves, and he simply passes the time by watching the remaining matches. The next fight is between Mira and the wrestler Ma, who suggests Mira to give up her wooden sword because it won't work on her. Mira stands firm with her sword in hand and tries to evade Ma's attacks by swinging her sword, but one kick pushes her to the edge of the ring. She quickly gets up and charges toward Ma, but is quickly thrown back down with a head slam, which is followed by a body slam. Ma reveals that her motive for fighting in this tournament is to have her wish of having a male harem be granted. Mira is repulsed by her shallowness and resumes her charge with the sword, but Ma effortlessly blocks it with a guard and reminds her not to rely on her sword because a wrestler's body is trained to withstand the toughest blows. Mira swings once again, but Ma jumps back and decides to end the fight with another takedown. She already starts celebrating her victory, but Mira gets back up and declares that she doesn't need her wooden sword to be a swordsman. She then swings her straight arm, which surprisingly causes a slash to appear on Ma's body. She follows this with a double slash, which cuts Ma even deeper and cocks her out, allowing Mira to secure a comeback win. After the fight, Mujin walks into Jin's room with a green-haired referee named Q and informs him that his punishment is that he will only be allowed to return to the tournament if he beats Q in a fight. Jin throws a tantrum and demands that he fight the blonde commissioner instead, because the blondie was the one who beat his ass earlier when he was scouted for the tournament. However, Q surprises him with a sucker punch and claims to be stronger than the blondie, causing Jin to finally accept. Mujin reveals that the fight will happen in front of everyone at the ring tomorrow. Before Jin leaves the arena, Mujin catches up to him to give him a bag of fruit and advises him to eat them since fruits help recover from exhaustion. He soon catches up to Mira and Han as they walk back home and tells them about the match tomorrow. Despite their warnings that Q will be very strong, he confidently states that he will win. Once he returns home, he devours the fruits and starts laying out his bed to rest, but suddenly starts throwing up blood and loses consciousness. The next day, Han visits his cancer-battling friend named Sun to check on how his treatments are going. Sun explains that he will soon be trying a new drug, but since it'll cost a fortune, his sister is working day and night to get him the money. He also heard that Han has been working overtime at multiple places as well, and requests him to stop doing it for him. However, Han assures him that he'll do no matter what to make his friend recover. Later that day, he gets approached by two delinquents he knew from school while working his shift at a restaurant. They taunt him about his friend getting cancer, saying that he deserves it. They point out how Han is nothing without Sun and kick a can at him, causing the drink inside to stain his shirt. Despite their harassment, Han keeps his cool and ignores them to continue doing his work as a waiter. After his shift, he goes to the arena for the next round of the prelims, where he gets matched up against the baseball bat-swinging nerd named Beak. As they face off against each other, Beak guesses that Han is a karate practitioner due to the calluses on his hands. Han starts on the offensive, but all his strikes are dodged, after which Beak lands 6 continuous swings on him with absolute precision. Han is surprised over how Beak can predict all his moves, to which Beak smirks and explains that he has already read everything there is about karate 3 years ago and knows how to counter against it flawlessly. He reveals that he has entered the tournament to test his theory that a person with intelligence and violence can't lose to anyone. Han admits that Beak is interesting and continues the fight with new focus. Beak launches a whirlwind of attacks on Han, but this time, Han swerves away from the bat each time and tries to punch his face. He narrowly misses, but instead follows it up with a jump to dodge Beak's low attack and turns it into a kick to his face. Beak gets pushed back by the impact, but immediately tries to throw a couple swings, which Han blocks with his arms. Beak takes a step back and tries to charge at him to finish the fight, but instead slips and hits Han's head, causing it to bleed. He braces for an attack, but instead finds Han extending his hand to help him get up, so he asks why he didn't attack. Han replies that it would have been unfair to win the fight that way. Beak takes his hand and decides to test how long Han can last with that type of attitude. He uses a special attack called 12 Spears, which lands 12 blows on Han's torso before he can even realize he's being attacked. The blows cause Han's knees to buckle, and Beak explains that the attacks are so deep that they've affected even his internal organs, which means that Beak is bound to win now. However, Han thinks back to Sun struggling to live, but still having hope to overcome his battle, which makes him stand back up and ready to fight. Beak launches 72 consecutive attacks, but Han pushes them back with an air shield and follows it up with an arm slash that creates winds so strong that they form a tornado around Beak. Before Beak can recover, Han is already right in front of him and is able to throw a series of punches and jabs which eventually overwhelm Beak's defenses, allowing him to land all his subsequent blows. Han prepares to launch his final blow, but Beak admits his theory has been proven wrong and gets knocked out before that, making Han the winner. That marks the end of all the scheduled matches and the start of the fight between Jin and Q, which will decide Jin's fate in the tournament. However, he is nowhere to be found, and just as he is about to be disqualified for good, he runs into the ring and declares he is ready. The referee lays out the condition of the fight, which is that if Jin manages to down Q even once, it will be considered his win. Within the first second of the fight, Jin casually takes off Q's glasses and pushes him, causing him to fall on his ass. The host declares the match over in a totally baffled tone. However, the audience gets pissed off and Q immediately gets back up and tries to punch him. Jin dodges it and follows it with a kick that pushes him again. Han feels his body feels unusually hot, but doesn't have time to worry because Q gets back up and unleashes his true power in the form, a giant joker with a scythe. The joker swings its scythe at Jin, forcing him to run for his life. One of the swings causes the scythe to get lodged into the ground, allows Jin to jump up and run toward the joker, but it simply grabs him with its other arm and proceeds to attack him with the scythe. Helpless, Jin thinks he is about to die, but the joker disappears into thin air at the last moment. It turns out that the commissioners restrained Q at the nick of time, which saved Jin's life. Mujin coolly walks into the ring and frankly informs Q that his pay will be reduced for the next 3 months. He then walks up to Jin and tells him that he's the winner while watching him carefully, as if he has realized something. Right after, the last 4 fighters are officially announced, which are Jin, Han, Mira, and a jiu-jitsu practitioner Yihi. The first fight is set to be between Han and Mira, causing Jin to get frustrated that he won't be able to fight both of them. While the 3 walk back home, a fancy car suddenly blocks their way. From it, a random guy with a suit comes out and kneels in front of Mira and declares that the purpose of his existence is to meet her and requests her hand in marriage. None of them know how to respond. It turns out that this guy named Songjin is a rich, multi-talented businessman known for being the best martial artist icon in the country. Even though she rejects him at first, he proposes to her once again at her dojo and charms her by saying that she's a beautiful gem with unlimited potential, and it will be his mission to make her family's amazing moonlight sword style big through his clout. Since Mira's only dream is to fulfill her dad's wish of reviving the family's craft, she accepts his proposal. Later that day, Mira's uncle, who is the one who has been taking care of her since her father's death, confronts Songjin about what his true motives are for proposing to her since she is still just a child and they were strangers until a moment before. Songjin sticks to his point that he sees the potential in moonlight sword style and he will dedicate himself to making it so popular that it'll be featured in the Olympics in 5 years. He insists that he is the key to realizing the dream that both him and Mira's father failed to achieve. Meanwhile, Jin overhears a group of gossiping schoolgirls whisper about Mira's rumored engagement, which prompts him to immediately go to her place and object to the marriage. He angrily points out that if she goes through with it, she won't have time for the tournament and will have to withdraw. Mira tries to close the door on him, but he stops it with his foot and asks if this random guy is more important than moonlight sword style, to which she says that she's marrying him because of it. This confuses him enough that she pushes him away and shuts the door. Jin doesn't know when to quit though because he calls up Han and asks for his help, insisting that they get to the bottom of this because Mira looked unhappy and unlike herself when he met her. Han advises him against sticking his nose into other people's business and hangs up. Over at the ceremony, Mira's uncle watches as she gets ready in her white wedding dress and gets flashbacks of her sacrificing her femininity during her childhood for the sake of being the perfect successor. He approaches Songjin again and requests the wedding be called off after all because even though Mira thinks she's making the adult decision, she is still too young. However, Mira butts in at that moment and calmly assures him that she knows what she's doing and that she'll use Songjin's influence to her full advantage after this marriage. Songjin smiles and agrees to this arrangement. Mira's little sister, who had so far been enthusiastically planning the wedding, realizes that Mira doesn't actually like the guy she's marrying, causing her to sneak off in sadness. Jin finds her sitting outside the hall crying and asks her what's up, to which she tells him everything. Jin is proud he was right all along and decides it's time he intervenes, but they are stopped by the security who tell them that guests without an invitation aren't allowed inside. Jin tries to force his way in, but they grab him and threaten to use force if he continues. Obviously, Jin continues to try, so they start beating him up with a baton against which he is unable to use his taekwondo moves. He waits for the next blow, but it doesn't come because Han stops the guard. The guards try to hit him too, but he dodges and pushes them with his shoulder, causing them to fall like dominoes. Finally, they enter the ceremony hall and yell out to Mira to stop the marriage. Songjin interferes, to which they tell him to shut up because he's clearly trying to dupe her for some reason. After seeing the guards knocked out, Songjin realizes he needs to take matters into his own hands. He lunges with his sword, but Han grabs it mid-swing and tells Jin to go to Mira. Jin approaches her, but she refuses to look him in the eye. He directly tells her that he knows she doesn't actually want to get married and points out that a dream is pointless unless you do it yourself. Mira thinks of all the times she has sacrificed being a girl for the purpose of her dream. But her efforts were meaningless after all because her dojo recently got an eviction notice. She yells at him for thinking this is such a simple matter and shoves her bouquet in his face and throws a punch, which he blocks but feels the strength behind it. She keeps throwing punches until one finally lands, but it hits her uncle instead because he stepped in between them. He He looks at her in the eye and assures her that she doesn't have to do this because even her father wouldn't have wanted this for her. Her sister also begs her to marry someone she truly loves and can be happy with. Mira remembers the time her father taught her that the essence of their sword style is to use techniques in one's own way, which leads her to finally change her mind and inform Songjin that she doesn't want to get married. Songjin starts laughing and finally reveals his true intentions of just wanting to capture Moonlight Sword's successor's strength. He unleashes his powers in the form of a fearful samurai, similar to the Joker in Jin's fight. He slashes her torso slightly, but she keeps her hand on his sword and uses Moonlight Sword Style's move called NP to strike his face so hard that he gets knocked out. Everybody evacuates the building after the incident, after which the trio is up to its usual shenanigans. Suddenly, a car honks at them and a bandaged-up Songjin says goodbye while waving her sword at them. Mira decides to let him go because she doesn't need it to keep her father's dream alive. Together, the three of them walk into the sunset hand in hand and laughing. Later that day, Han gets called to the hospital because his friend has reached critical condition and needs immediate surgery. He watches on as doctors run around Sun while trying to do everything to save him. The next day, Jin sleeps in and has to run to the arena to catch a glimpse of Han and Mira's fight. But once he walks in, he is shocked to see Han brutally attacking Mira with gruesome blows to the point that he has to be stopped by the referee who tells him that he has already won the fight. Mira just lays on the ground while bleeding out. After the match, Jin stays silent as Han walks past him, while coldly telling him that he'll see him at the finals. The next day, Jin is matched up against the Jiu-Jitsu fighter Yi in the semifinals, who is confident he'll beat Jin after watching his fight with Manoch, but quickly gets humbled by an unexpected roundhouse kick that knocks him out. With that fight, Jin and Han are confirmed to be the finalists in the regional prelims. After the fight, Jin visits Mira at the clinic ward where she is still recovering from her injuries with the help of the nanobots injected from the bracelet. He sits next to her feeling completely depressed and betrayed because he thought Han was their friend. But Mira simply says that she lost like that because she was much weaker than him, and that Jin should be careful not to underestimate him when facing him in the finals. The next day, Jin and Han face each other in the finals, but for the longest time, neither of them can get an upper hand. For every kick that Jin lands, Han throws an equally powerful punch. After being ushered back for the 100th time, Jin gets a flashback of seeing Mira's bleeding body from the previous day's fight, which angers him enough to dodge Han's next attack and follow it with a 3-step kick that blasts Han across the ring. Jin extends his hand and tells Han to get up, which he grabs but in a surprising twist. He apologizes because he never thought of them as a friend. He then hurls Jin up in the air and prepares to attack with him with a series of his most powerful moves. As he beats Jin to a pulp, he thinks back to his conversation with Mujin a few days before, in which Mujin made a contract with Han that if he secured landslide victories in the semi-final and final matches of the prelims, the organizers would use their nanobots to fully treat Sun. Han gets ready to perform his finishing blow, but Jin somehow finds the strength to get on his feet and charge towards Han with his own powerful kick. Both of them attack at the same time, but in the end, Han's attack meets its mark and Jin falls to the ground while bleeding out. The referee begins the 10-second countdown for Jin to get back up, but just at that moment, Mujin walks up to Han and informs him that Sun has passed away. Jin somehow gets up in the last second, but the news crushes Han's spirit at the crucial moment and he falls down himself. He stands back up, but throughout the rest of the fight, all he can do is try to block Jin's relentless kicks while thinking of his memories with Sun. Suddenly, a voice is heard through a megaphone yelling at Han to snap back to attention and fight with the strength he used against her. He turns around to see Mira, who approaches the ring and hands him a letter from Sun, who met her at the hospital during his last moments and asked her to give it to him. The letter revives his motivation, and he turns toward Jin to continue the fight with a smile. Jin gets excited to finally face his friend in this match, and they run toward each other. As the fight goes on, Sun's words echo in Han's mind, which tell him that he has no regrets in his life, and so Han should stop fighting for his sake and start fighting for himself. The fight between the two titans turn into a perfect storm as they praise each other's moves. Han launches Jin into the air with his special Azure Dragon move, causing Jin to recognize his opponent is the best after all and use the Azure Dragon move in his own kick, which finally knocks Han down for good. Once Jin is declared the winner, he extends his hand to Han once again and asserts that they're friends. Han lets out a laugh and gets back up with the help of his friend, and as the crowd cheers, Jin and Mira help Han out of the ring while keeping up their usual bickering. After the end of the finals, the first and second positions in the prelims of their district are determined to be Jin and Han respectively, but the third place is still up for grabs and will be decided by a fight between Mira and Yihi. Yihi is kind enough to say that he won't hold back even if Mira is a girl, but she cuts him off mid-sentence with a swing that knocks him out in the most embarrassing way. After the fight, it is announced that the top 3 of each district will advance to the main God of High School tournament as a team that will work together against other teams to progress. Jin battles with the excitement of fighting alongside his friends and the disappointment that he won't get to fight them because they're a team for which Mira screams at him for being a psycho. She asks him why he wants to fight so badly, to which he reminds her that he just wants to get stronger by fighting strong people, which is such a simple-minded and embarrassing answer that both Han and Mira speed up to get away from him. As he runs to catch up to them, he walks past an old man that gives off an unusual aura, but when he turns back to look, there's nobody to be found. With 2 weeks left until the main tournament, Jin decides to train by himself at a park, but instead ends up procrastinating by chasing after cute cats, doing yoga with old people, and doing volunteer work. While trying to give a kid back his balloon that got stuck in a tree, the branch snaps, causing him to fall and sprain his ankle. Suddenly, he feels a sharp pain there and finds an old man poking an acupuncture needle into his ankle, after which the pain disappears. The old man reveals he is Bongchim, a martial arts instructor, and that he has decided to make Jin his pupil so that he has the skills to face the tough opponents in the tournament. Meanwhile, Han has a meeting with Mujin where Mujin asks him if he still has the motivation to fight, to which Han says he does. Mujin smiles and tells him that even though he came second in the prelims, he needs to reach the top of the tournament, to which Han replies that he will do his best if Mujin tells him about the strange powers behind this tournament. Mujin thinks about it for a while and reveals that the true goal of the tournament is to bring together fighters who either already or have the potential to borrow the power of monsters, beasts, magical beings, and gods, so that they can find the most powerful one called the God of High School. At the same time, Mira goes out shopping and bumps into the tournament's host named Sim. She notices the cane on his hand and realizes that he is actually blind. Once they sit on a bench together, he tells her that she is not using the full power of Moonlight Sword style and advises her to channel her feelings into her sword to unlock her true potential. When Mira asks why he is helping her, he reveals that he has a high opinion of Moonlight Sword style because it's the reason he became blind. Finally, the first day of the tournament arrives and Jin is awoken by Han and Mira, who arrive at his doorstep to make sure he doesn't oversleep. On their way, Han explains everything that Mujin told him during the meeting, warning the other two that most of the other participants may have special powers like Q's Clown and Songjin's Samurai. This obviously doesn't scare Jin, but further hypes him up to kick some ass. At the arena, the commentator hypes the audience up by revealing the 9 teams competing in the tournament. Mira, however, notices that the commentator this time isn't Sim and starts worrying. It turns out that he and his family were actually assassinated by someone wearing a bunny costume at the park right after they had talked. The show must still go on, and the first match is between our home team, Seoul, and Chengdu. The rules are simple. The team to secure 2 wins in one-on-one pairings first will be victorious. The first duel is between Jin and a barrel-shaped Gidong. Jin prepares himself for the fight by touching the acupuncture points that will help activate his hidden strength thanks to the teachings of the mysterious old man. He is about to charge, but then realizes his legs are completely still, meaning he messed up the points. Gidong beats him up like a plaything, causing Jin to lose the fight in the most embarrassing fashion. The second battle is between Han and a 38-year-old blondie named Ping. Han lands a punch and hits his opponent's neck with a double combo kick. Ping grabs him by his belt and swings him around in circles to use the momentum and throw him in the air. As Han falls back down, Ping strikes him with a blow that launches him to the other side of the ring. Ping thinks he's going to finish the fight, but Han is already on his feet and delivers his iconic series of moves. Once Ping's defenses are down, Han begins overwhelming him with non-stop punches, which forces him to back into a corner. However, he remembers the years of his struggle in order to get into high school after failing multiple times. Despite all the embarrassing rumors, he stuck to his goal and ultimately passed thanks to his teammates' help. He recalls his dream of using his wish to help those who don't do well in high school. As Han runs toward him, Ping knocks him away with his special power called Thor Hammer. Han quickly gets back up and runs toward him, but this time he blocks Ping's swing. After that, he destroys Ping's hammer with his Azure Dragon move, which sucks all the power out of Ping and knocks him out. With that fight, both teams are tied and their fate will be determined by the next battle. Meanwhile, the organizers all worry because of the recent news of Sim's brutal death and Q's mysterious absence. It turns out that the assassin's next target was Q, who he ended up fatally injuring after breaking into his house. He cockily laughs, assuming that Q, who is the most powerful referee, has been killed by him, but suddenly his arm is chopped off. Q gets up alongside his scythe-wielding clown, and the assassin tries to make a run for it. Q corners him and cuts his other arm off, after which he destroys the wall behind the assassin just as a power move. The assassin laughs as his arms rejoin, revealing that he has the borrowed power to regenerate. Q doesn't care and is about to attack him again, but is stopped by two other strangers who identify themselves as members of an organization called Knox. They yell at the assassin, who they call Drake, for interfering with their jobs of killing the referees. Drake nervously tries to argue that he is a member as well who should be given mission. Q gets tired of these strangers bickering in his house and throws a bunch of Joker cards at the two newcomers, which stop mid-air and release sharp spears. The blue-haired guy carries the other girl and flies away with black wings. The quiet girl unleashes 100 arms from the ground to attack Q, which he slices one by one, but two end up grabbing his legs and tripping him. The arms immediately wrap around him like pythons and begin constricting him. They both are about to double team him, but one of the other referees named O arrives at just the right moment to block their attacks. O explains that they noticed his power limiter had been released, which prompted them to check on him, following it with the sad news that he will have an additional 3-month pay cut as penalty for releasing his limiter without permission. Q doesn't have time to feel sorry for his broke ass because the Knox duo resume the fight, but eventually Q and O overpower them, forcing them to escape. Drake crawls out of his hole and tells them not to ignore him because he will be the one to kill them. As he maniacally laughs, his head enlarges and explodes, causing the entire floor to be wiped up. Over at the arena, the last battle is between Mira and Jamie, who both happen to be swordsmen. Their swords clash multiple times, but Mira is clearly more powerful and ends up pushing Jamie away and snapping her sword. Jamie is forced to use her borrowed power called Bastard, but Mira fully dodges it and decides to follow Sim's advice. She attaches her thoughts to her weapon, which allows her to run up to Jamie and kick the daylights out of her. This knocks Jamie out, making Mira the decisive winner and the Soul team the victors of the first match. The next match is between Jedu and Jedu teams, with the first battle being between Jean, the heir of a multimillion corporation, and Teak. It is a one-sided fight in which Teak uses his borrowed power called Megalodon to brutally rip apart his opponent. One of Jean's teammates tries to interfere, but she also gets knocked out, after which he proceeds to repeatedly kick her face. Mira blocks Jin from interfering, warning him that he'll be disqualified for sure. However, it isn't Jin she should have been stopping because Han gets in the way this time and tells Teak to stop. Teak is about to attack, but the commentator interferes. During the stalemate, Jean secretly activates his power called Lightning Bolt to electrocute Teak. However, Teak quickly gets out of the lightning circle and finishes the fight. After the day's matches, the organizers have their hands full with other matters. One of the commissioners informs Mugen of all the developments involving Knox, after which Mugen guesses there's a spy in their organization who informed Knox of Q's confidential home address. The next day, Jin, Mira, and Han watch the rest of the team fights to scout who their opponents will be in the quarterfinals. An interesting match involves a team called the Du, which is paired against a team that is clearly superior in terms of strength. The first fight goes as expected with a Jedu loss. However, before the start of the next battle, Jedu's fighter Sunny has a strategy meeting with her teammate cousin Ilpo. Once the two opponents face each other in the ring, Sunny's opponent looks down on her team for relying on theory and plans in a physical fight that depends on strength. He immediately starts throwing punches, but she simply backs away from all of them. Suddenly, she does a high kick that hits his chin and immediately knocks him out. Seeing this, Mira and Han realize that Ilpo must have told Sunny to not engage with his attacks, because he will use all his strength to subdue her and instead sneak a counter in to hit him in a place that will be a weak spot. They decide they should be cautious of Ilpo and his team from now on. At that moment, Mira ends up scolding Han for interfering with Teak earlier because it got him suspended from participating, leaving only her and Jin to get them through the rest of the rounds. She then turns around to yell at Jin also just because she can, but notices him staring at the stage with full focus. The final tie-breaking battle is between Ilpo himself and a fur coat-wearing thug named Gwym. Ilpo makes eye contact with Gwym and sternly tells him that he won't be able to defeat him, so he should just surrender, after which a strong menacing aura spreads throughout the arena. However, Gwym doesn't back down, which surprises Ilpo's teammates because all his previous opponents gave up after that move. Instead, Gwym initiates an attack, but Ilpo blocks it and sweeps his foot off the ground. Gwym barely manages to stay standing, but before he can recover, Ilpo starts a barrage of attacks based on a primitive martial arts called Tikyon that throws Gwym into a corner. Gwym quickly gets up and charges, but Ilpo lands a liver punch that takes Gwym's breath away for a moment. With no options left, Gwym unleashes his special power, which is a bunch of evil black blobs that rain down on Ilpo as he tries to run toward Gwym. Finally, he pounces at Gwym with the intention to attack, but Gwym traps him in a cage. Or so he thinks, because it turns out Ilpo actually jumped behind him so he could kick Gwym in the chin and knock him out. With that, Jedu wins the match and proceeds to the quarterfinals. Despite the interesting action, Jin has only had his eyes on the white tiger on the back of Ilpo's hoodies, which he recognizes to be the same mark as the one on his grandfather's military uniform. Later that day, while the main three walk back home as usual, Han and Mira nervously discuss how they will clearly be outmatched in the semifinals because all the other opponents have some special power. Han points out that Mujin told him that the numbers on their wristbands indicate the potential they have for unlocking those special powers called God powers, and so even they might be able to have their own if the right conditions are met. At that moment, Jin, who has been silent so far, blurts out that he will not use such powers since he wants to get stronger on his own and not by borrowing some other magical being's powers. Mira tries to reason with him, but he abruptly claims he needs to go somewhere else and leaves. He walks some distance and finally lays down on a park bench to think back on his meeting with Mujin earlier that day, where he was asked if he had made contact with his grandfather or anyone related to him recently. After he denied it, they showed him pictures of a damaged area, claiming that giant craters were formed by somebody using God power, and after investigating the site, blood was found that was confirmed to be his grandfather's. Judging from the amount of blood, Mujin told him that there is a very low chance that he would have survived, even though Jin had confidently said that they should be more worried about the one who dared to mess with his grandfather. He has been worrying over the possibility that he has passed away. His sulking is interrupted by Ilpo, who approaches him and asks to shake his hands since he's a fan. As soon as Jin holds his hand, Ilpo grabs him and pulls him on his feet. He then starts attacking him out of nowhere, while revealing that he's been watching Jin since the prelims and eventually successfully kicks him in the face. The next thing Jin knows is that the world is upside down because Ilpo grabbed his legs and spun him so that his head hits the ground. He then goes to punch his face but stops right before making contact. Jin asks him why he didn't go through with it, to which Ilpo asks him the same, showing that he noticed Jin also stopped his kick that would have bashed his head in. After that, Ilpo extends his hand in a friendly gesture and introduces himself, explaining that he just wanted to have a bout with Jin regardless of if they get matched against each other in the tournament. Jin doesn't mind and asks him about the tiger mark, to which Ilpo says that it's a sign of respect for Jin's grandfather named Tijin. He shares that when his father died when he was just a young kid, his mother sent him away to train in a dojo. He hated being in the unfamiliar place with unfamiliar people and was unable to make his instructor proud even if he tried his best. However, everything changed when Jin's grandfather Tijin appeared and handed him a secret manual made by his grandfather, which was filled with notes about his lifelong research on the martial arts he created named Tikayon. Tijin told him that he was friends with his grandfather, and they saved the world together. As a final favor to him, he was giving the manual to Ilpo so that he could grow up to be a man like his grandfather. Ever since then, he has preserved the memory of that moment by having the hoodie with the same tiger mark as Tijin while learning his own grandfather's Tikyon style of fighting. After sharing his story, he asks Jin if Tijin is doing well now. Before Jin can figure out how to answer that, Ilpo blocks a surprise attack from Teak with his bare hands. He angrily tells Teak that they can have their rivalry, but he shouldn't involve other people like Jin into this. Teak simply smirks and walks away, after which Ilpo warns Jin to be careful of him because he is a dangerous man. Jin asks him if his hand okay, to which he says it's no need to worry and wishes him luck for the tournament before making a quick exit. Once Ilpo's gone, Jin gets frustrated that he didn't even know of the threat until Ilpo blocked it for him. The next day, Han runs into Q struggling to get a single coin from a narrow spot while working at one of his shifts. Q explains that he's super broke because he's now living through a 9-month pay cut because he broke into Mujin's apartment and tried to attack him for letting Sim's family die, which resulted in him damaging the apartment. Thankfully, one of the commissioners later explained that as soon as Sim's body was discovered, his family was shifted to a safe location and was replaced by dummies to fool the assassin. Han takes pity on him and gives him a free meal at the restaurant he's working in, during which he proposes a deal with Q that if he trains him to use God powers daily, he will give him free dinner every day. Q asks him if he wants to learn to win the tournament, to which he admits that it is part of the reason, but it's also because he wants to get strong and reliable enough for Jin to tell him what he's been worrying about lately. Meanwhile, Jin has been spending his time training hard so that he can stronger not for the tournament but to get strong enough that he can have his grandfather back. Since the reason Taejin left him is to protect young 6-year-old him from dangerous guys who were after his grandfather. Taejin had promised to be back when he was older, but there has been no sign of him even on the day of his 17th birthday. He spends the whole day staring at their picture sadly until Han and Mira break into his house to surprise him with confetti. They force him out of the house, after which Mira proudly presents a box of sushi. Han swiftly one-ups her by revealing a whole feast that he prepared, surprising both Jin and Mira, who didn't think he could cook. Jin compliments Mira's cooking, but Han has a more sophisticated palate, so he takes the time to critique the small mistakes in her dish. However, once he opens his eyes, he finds all the food they brought has completely vanished because Jin the monster devoured it all. They spend the rest of the day playing fun games and eating cake until they can no longer stand. Later in the evening, Han tries to ask Jin if everything's okay but changes his mind and switches to teasing him. The next day, Jin gets a knock on his door, but when he opens it, he only finds an envelope on his doorstep. When he opens it, he finds a map inside and a picture of his grandfather injured and bound up in ropes. Jin immediately drops everything and cycles his way to the destination on his map, determined to get his grandfather in time to reach the tournament. The location turns out to be an abandoned warehouse, which he enters to find his grandfather on the floor and in a horrible state. He desperately tries to wake him up, but suddenly his grandfather starts laughing and a stranger's voice comes out from his body saying that it was easy to trick him. His body starts becoming more and more disfigured until it explodes, causing the entire warehouse to become damaged. Once Jin regains consciousness, he finds a gray-haired man named Fei smirking at him and saying that it's his job to get rid of small fry like Jin to speed up the process of awakening something called the key. Jin gathers to strength to get on his feet, during which Fei multiplies himself into clones. Meanwhile, Mira and Han panic over Jin's absence and try to stall for time. However, the commissioner lady tells them the match will go on as planned, and their only option is to hope he shows up by the time of the second match after Mira's, because his absence will mean his automatic defeat. Han tells Mira to focus on winning the first match, and he will go and look for Jin. The first battle begins, and it's between Mira and one of the cloaked members from Team Jeju. As soon as the fight begins, he disrobes himself to reveal he is a giant shredded self-proclaimed sea monk named Lee. Mira makes several strikes at him, but he remains unwounded because of the thick layer of sunscreen on him. Mira gets frustrated and climbs atop him to strangle him from the back. Once he falls down, she tries to land another strike with her hand, but he defends and grabs her from the back. Before he can finish his takedown, she jams her sword into his sword to hit his vitals, which allows her to break free of his grasp. She then charges for another attack, but Lee's teammate throws him his own sword, which lets him block her swing. Immediately, she realizes he's using her father's sword, which triggers her. Lee tries to bother her further by saying that he's always wanted to know who used this sword before since it's been very well used. Mira grits her teeth and pushes his blade away and tries to swing again while screaming at him to give the sword back. However, Lee blocks her attack again, and this time her sword's tip snaps. After that, Lee transforms her father's wooden sword into the real thing, while telling her that even though the previous owner used it well, she never discovered its true power. While following swing after swing, he teases her about not knowing of the sword's true nature of possessing a god power and being a national treasure. Mira ignores all this and retaliates with a double sword attack, a kick to his face and a strike at his chest, which causes him to lose the sword, allowing Mira to hold it once again. However, it disappears from her hand and reappears in front of Lee since he is its true owner. He begins another round of attacks and scolds her for disappointing their expectations of not activating the sword despite being Moonlight Sword Style's successor. He ends up stabbing her in the side and kicks her down while calling her weak. Despite bleeding out, Mira tries her hardest to get back up and fight for her sword. Meanwhile, Jin struggles to fight off Fei's army of clones, but eventually gets outnumbered by the hundreds, who form a pillar and pin him down. While trying to get out of their grasp, he turns his head to see the dead bodies of the Team Jeju members. Fei cackles and reveals that the real members are indeed dead, and the ones in the tournament today are Knox imposters. Jin somehow gets up and uses acupuncture to numb his entire body, so he doesn't feel pain for an entire hour. Over at the arena, Mira gets picked up by the fake Lee and slapped multiple times while being told what a loser she is. After receiving a brutal gut punch, she finds it hard to go on, but after hearing Lee say that Jin won't be showing up, she realizes that these shady cloaked Jeju members have done something to him. She gets riled up and starts another string of attacks, while insisting that Jin will defeat them no matter what, so she too will do her part. Lee summons his sword again and pushes her back, leading her into a state of hopelessness. However, something awakens inside of her, and she realizes she can't give up because she needs to see through the end of this tournament with Jin and Han. Her determination to become strong is genuine for the first time, and she successfully awakens the power of her ancestors' moonlight sword style. A shift in power is clear in the arena, and this new Mira successfully snatches her sword back from fake Lee, calling it the God Power Hero Ilpo. This forces Lee to unleash his God Power Kraken, which is a filthy octopus that extends its tentacles toward her, but she chops them up and finally takes Lee down, making her the victor. Exhausted, Mira herself falls to the ground, but somebody catches her head just in time, and she opens her eyes to see that Jin has shown up after all. As Han carries Mira away to a stretcher, she asks him what happened to Jin, to which he says he doesn't really know, but it's the first time he's seen Jin so angry. The next battle begins, and the Knox imposter asks Jin what happened to Faye. Jin gives no answer, so he begins to attack with his god power while yelling at him to answer his question. Jin dodges all the projectiles and beings his own merciless attack, which is the exact copy of the moves he used on Faye to defeat him at the warehouse. He swiftly finishes the fight with his new and fierce twin Azure Dragon kick move. After the match, Mugen meets with Jin, Han and Mira to explain that the Team Jeju members they fought with were actually fake. No shit. Han asks what Knox is and what they want, to which Mugen answers that it is basically a cult that worships one god and their mission is to destroy all the other gods and god power users. This mission involves taking control of the god of high school tournament and also capturing Jin's grandfather to use his strength. Jin is determined to rescue him, but Mugen bluntly tells him to give that up because he's too weak right now, but promises that if he goes on to win the tournament, Mugen will give him some valuable information. The next day in the semifinals, the Seoul team is against the Jeoldu team. Seeing Jin in a reclusive state, Han, whose suspension has been revoked, volunteers to participate in the first battle, which is against Sunny. At first, Sunny seems to be in the lead, taking Han down early in the match. However, Han wraps his legs around her head and throws her away. Before she can regain footing, he's already all up in her face. Ilpo watches with relief because Sunny listened to his advice and directed her first attack as a palm to his ear, which caused a gust of air to enter his ear canal and disrupt his balance. Han tries to recompose herself, but Sunny kicks his shoulder, against which he is unable to dodge. However, he grabs her leg and slowly pushes it away by using some special power, surprising both Mira and Jin. Next, he punches her gut and kicks her away. The host starts counting down to 10, during which Ilpo frantically tells her not to get up because Han will surely win after she was unable to defeat him with the first attack. Still, she gets up and jumps into the air to kick him down, but he meets her kick with his fist, which ends with her being overpowered and getting knocked out for good. After winning them their first battle, Han goes to his teammates, who ask him about the glimmer of special powers he revealed during the fight. He ignores them and assures Jin that they will win no matter what. After having a cute team moment, Jin meets his opponent Ilpo in the ring. Jin's taekwondo faces Ilpo's taekyon in a fierce fight, but every now and then, Ilpo gets the better of him. One of the kicks causes Jin to get down on his knees, and as he stays there stumped, Ilpo explains that one of his weak points is close quarter combat. Jin jumps high to deliver a glorious kick, but Ilpo successfully counters, pointing out that his second weakness is that his preparation movements for his techniques are too grand and obvious. Jin then deploys his signature twin Azure Dragon kick, which Ilpo matches with his own signature Roaring Fire Whirling Blade. Once the two forces meet, destruction occurs, and once the dust settles, Jin crumbles to his knees again. Finally, Ilpo reveals his third weakness, which is that his techniques put too much of strain on his body. So now that he failed to defeat him with his move, there's no way he can beat Ilpo. All attacks that Jin follows with next are easily dodges and countered by Ilpo, who taunts him for being a disappointment to his grandfather. However, Jin, who is determined to save his grandfather, decides he needs to figure out a way to beat this guy. So for his next move, he makes a sharp and rapid arc with his arm which slashes through Ilpo's chest. Ilpo is shocked to realize that Jin just used Mira's Moonlight Sword style technique. Following Ilpo's points on his weaknesses, Jin continues to use Moonlight Sword style to land attacks from a distance. Ilpo tries to fight back, but Jin uses Han's subtle reverse technique to use Ilpo's force against himself without having his movements read like an open book. Ilpo asks him what he's going to do about his third weakness, which Jin replies by saying he'll worry about it later as he progresses with his next attack. Ilpo encourages Jin even further in the middle of his attacks, as if he's coaching him. Both of them seem to be having fun as they fight each other, and Jin finally activates his new move thanks to Ilpo, which is Azure Dragon Tempest Dance. Ilpo counters it with his ultimate move called Raging Fire's Blazing Edge. The two powers meet in an explosion, and ultimately it's Ilpo who is knocked out. As he lays on the ground defeated, Ilpo thinks back to his memory of Tijin, which he didn't share with Jin, which was Tijin requesting him to teach Jin everything he can if they ever meet. After this fight, Ilpo smiles to himself because he's fulfilled Tijin's request and made Jin a strong fighter worthy of being Tijin's grandson. However, something awakens within him, and he decides he can't afford to lose after all. In a surprise twist, he gets back up, but now he has silver white hair, yellow eyes, sharp fox ears, and 9 tails. The 9-tailed fox spirit has infiltrated Ilpo's body to enact its revenge. You see, the fox spirit had trained for thousands of years to protect the Lord of the Heavens from danger. But he eventually got so powerful that the Lord felt threatened and condemned him. In a rage, the 9-tailed fox spirit destroyed half of the heavens and descended onto Earth so that one day he could reawaken and complete his revenge. Sensing a huge change in Ilpo, Jin decides to take things slow and assess the situation. He throws a couple of jabs but fails to penetrate Ilpo's shield. After that, Ilpo switches positions with lightning speed and attacks him in such rapid succession that it's impossible for Jin to react. Jin gets back up and mimics Ilpo's lightning-fast moves to surprise him and unleashes Azure Dragon Tempest Dance, but ultimately gets punched in the gut. As he recovers, he notices Ilpo struggle to regain control from his current 9-tailed form, but the yellow eyes return soon after. Despite the strength of his opponent, Jin is a dumbass who'll never give up, and he matches Ilpo's attack with his own. Fire completely surrounds them, and Ilpo launches another attack, thinking this will finish the fight. But Jin sees a vision which gives him the strength to extinguish Ilpo's fire. Confused about who Jin really is, Ilpo tries to destroy him, but Jin calmly counters his fire with a windstorm of his own, which launches Ilpo into the heavens where a giant hand crushes him back into the ring. This finally knocks Ilpo out, making Jin the winner of the battle. Han and Mira cheer for him and ask if the power he used was a god power, to which he says he's unsure. Meanwhile, this entire time, Mujin had been fighting Manoch, a high-status member of Knox who summoned their god. However, after sensing the presence of the 9-tailed spirit, which they call the Key, both sides stopped the duel to observe the outcome. After the spirit's surprising defeat, Manoch decides it's best to proceed with caution and escapes the scene. Immediately after he flees, Mujin orders the commissioners to secure the Key, which is Ilpo, and to stay on alert for any traps set by Manoch. After the match, Jin visits Ilpo at the secure hospital ward. He's being kept to find his other teammates are already there. After making some small talk, Jin tries to leave, but Ilpo insists he stay a bit longer and makes an excuse to get the other two out of the room. Once they're alone, he asks if Jin came to talk about something else, to which he nods and says he came to talk about his grandfather. He shares that Tijin has been captured, most probably by Knox, and he needs to win the tournament to get important intel from Mujin. Ilpo again warns him about Teak as his opponent in the finals, saying that he's dangerous and very powerful, but reassures him that he will win if he puts his mind to it. Shortly after Jin leaves, an explosion wrecks the hospital ward, which renders Sunny and Ilpo's other teammate unconscious. Through the dust and smoke, Ilpo sees Teak facing a monster version of Jean, who was also hospitalized in the same ward after his brutal loss against Teak. Jean slowly walks toward Teak, saying that he won't be defeated while absorbing all the human bodies in the way. Worried about the safety of his friends, Ilpo involves himself in the fight, but Teak grows spikes out of Jean's body to wound him, while telling Ilpo not to steal his prey. Jean retches from the pain and throws up a body which they realize is Jean's maid and teammate. At this point, he seems to have lost all control and launches another aimless attack. But his maid walks up to him and gently requests him to control himself because she is fine. Her words seem to reach him, and he starts coming back to his senses. But at the moment, Teak unleashes Megalodon and crushes him in its jaws, killing him. Both Sunny and Ilpo's other teammate also get caught in the midst of the attack, causing them to lose a leg and a limb. Seeing his cousin Sunny without her leg and his friend without an arm makes Ilpo's blood boil. Not only that, but Teak was also the reason his older sister, Sammy, became paralyzed from the waist down after a fight against him years ago. All this sends Ilpo over the edge, and he transforms into the 9-tailed fox spirit again to take Teak down. He grabs Teak and pushes them both out the window so they fall and hit the ground together. Teak unleashes Titan-like beasts on Ilpo, but fueled by the determination to avenge his loved ones, Ilpo rips them apart. Manoch, who senses the key again, opens his god portal and releases an army of skeleton monsters to destroy him because he worships the Lord of the Heavens that condemned the fox spirit. Q and O work together to defeat as many of the monsters as they can so they can't get to the key. Mugen sees in horror that Manoch has also summoned his god again, which means that if the Lord makes contact with Ilpo and the key, the world will be destroyed. Meanwhile, Ilpo beats the shit out of Teak with the help of his fox powers, but after having enough, Teak activates his god power to devour him. Both of them get absorbed into his monster shark, but Ilpo breaks them out of it, during which a red gemstone pendant comes out of him, which Teak recognizes as the key. Teak's eyes turn red, and more red eyes jut out of his body. The awakened monster in him takes its tongue out to grab the key, but it is intercepted by the skeleton monsters. All the parties fight for it, but it finally lands on Manoch's hands, but not for long because Jin kicks him away and grabs the key. Han and Mira check on Ilpo, who is unconscious and bleeding out of his head. Meanwhile, Mugen struggles to subdue the god in the sky, but knows it's near impossible without obtaining the key. At the same time, one of the commissioners informs him that America has learnt of the situation and has launched hundreds of nuclear missiles their way which could very well destroy the country. News all over is covering the chaos live and people are scrambling to evacuate or hide in shelters. Seeing the dire situation, Mugen teleports all the high school fighters to a spirit realm. Shortly after being teleported, Han and Mira find Sunny and Ilpo's other teammate, but their injuries cause so much pain that they can't go on. So Han uses his god power Kaichai to help them. When Mira asks him about it, he explains that he'd been training to activate his god power for some time and had intended to keep it a secret until he mastered it. With Kaichai, he has surrounded them with water infused with healing powers which should relieve them for a while until they can figure a way out. Elsewhere in the realm, Jin finds Ilpo unconscious and stops the bleeding by pinching certain acupuncture points. He wakes up after that and entrusts the key to Jin, saying that he doesn't know why it was inside his body, but he knows it carries immense power. So under no circumstances should Jin allow it to fall into Teak's hands. Right at that moment, an explosion goes off in the distance. Han and Mira have the misfortune of running into Teak, who set the explosion off to demand the whereabouts of the key. When they both keep their mouths shut, Teak unleashes his giants which they have to fight with their newly earned god powers. However, they're eventually defeated and Jin finds them both knocked out. Once he runs toward them, Teak asks him where the key is because he wants to use it to become the strongest being that ever lived. Han whispers to Jin that he should run away because Teak is not normal, but knowing him, he obviously decides to fight him. Over in Seoul, Mugen finally gets overpowered by the god, and his magic rune is destroyed, allowing God to unleash its power on the world. However, all of Seoul's citizens are teleported to a distant cliffside just at the nick of time. Mugen and the organizers are shocked, but know that only one man is powerful enough to do this. Indeed, it is Jason who is one of the organizers of the tournament and grandfather of Jean, who arrives at the last moment to avenge his dead grandson. With his overwhelming power, he quickly crushes God and teleports everyone back, including the high school gang, back to Seoul safely. However, the show is not over yet because Teak restrains Jin and gains the key, which he immediately consumes and transforms into a god. At the sight of transformed Teak, Jin feels a strange and unexplainable sensation run through his body. Teak begins attacking Han and Mira first, who he throws around like ragdolls, but Jin interferes. Teak restrains him again, but this time Jin breaks free and all three of them face him together. At one point, Teak throws a spear at Jin, but Han uses his body to shield him from it. At that moment, Jin gets flashbacks of memories he had forgotten, and it allows him to awaken his true self, which is a god named Heaven's Equal Great Sage. He summons his special staff and faces Teak, who tries to throw everything at him. However, Jin is now unstoppable and beats the crap out of Teak for the sake of all his friends that Teak dared hurt. He then calls upon a frightening storm and rains down lightning bolt after lightning bolt on Teak, which causes Teak to lose his godly form. However, Teak isn't done yet, and he uses the last of his strength to transform into an ugly monstrosity that I don't even know how to describe. Jin realizes he can no longer summon his staff, but Ilpo reminds him of the power of friendship, after which Jin, Ilpo, Han and Mira defeat Teak together. Jin unleashes a super powerful dragon which crashes into Teak and petrifies his ugly monster form, leaving only the upper body of his half-body, half-monster form. Ilpo extends a hand to Teak to help him from being eaten by the monster, but Teak brushes it away and accepts his death. Once he vanishes, he leaves a fragment of the key for Ilpo to show his change of heart in the last moment of his life. Once things settle down a bit, A random woman comes up to the remaining fighters and congratulates them for winning the tournament. Seeing their confused faces, she explains that she is one of the great six behind the tournament, and since they are the last few surviving at the end of it all, they are all the victors of God of High School tournament. She asks them to decide upon a wish that want granted, saying that she'll fulfill anything except reviving the dead. Jin almost immediately blurts out that he wants his grandfather back, but he looks back at the bruised faces of the others and comes to a realization. Han and Mira smile and say that they don't need a wish to fulfill their goals anymore, so Jin should go ahead and ask for his. But instead he asks for everyone whose body got hurt in the fight to be turned BCK to how it was before. Sunny and the others celebrate over getting their limbs and strength back. Seeing Jin worried, the woman reassures him that she can sense Jin Taejin's presence, which means he's alive but definitely weakened. Hearing this, relief washes over him, and he instantly falls asleep for the next 3 months. During that time, Seoul's mass reconstruction project is underway, but boosting the public's morale after the disaster turns out to be a difficult task. Mujin decides to run for president in the next election. Manoch also spreads his influence by making contacts and becoming famous. Ilpo goes on a mission to retrieve all fragments of the key scattered around the world, so that it can be rebuilt and used to lift the divine restriction on humans that prevent them from killing gods. When Jin finally wakes up, Han and Mira make him delicious hot pot, over which they explain that he needs to go to the great sage's birthplace to unlock his sealed memories. The three of them decide that they will go together and have each other's backs so that they can ultimately reunite Jin with his grandfather.